Yes. Yeah. That's the theme song. So, hello and welcome back to the Chico Creates podcast, where we interview artists, musicians, and makers from here in Chico, California. I am your host, Kira Barsodi, and with me today is Pat Hull. Hi.
Hello.
So Pat is a singer-songwriter from Connecticut, currently based out of Northern California. His music intertwines a melodic, soulful, countertenor vocal range with a unique finger-picking style, creating a dreamy landscape with unpredictable hooks and turns. He's set to release his 9th studio album this year, titled At All, produced by Chris Lynch. This release, as well as his back catalog, showcase layered compositions, songs written for piano, and rich vocal harmonies. Hello.
I didn't write that
again
about myself.
Someone else wrote that.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's beautiful. It's a beautiful description.
It's a little dated too, because I already released that album. So I'm actually on the 10th. I sent you a dated bio.
That's okay. Well, now I ask you, tell us a little bit about yourself beyond the bio, so you can make any corrections you want now.
Okay, cool. And is that the question? Should I go?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, tell us about yourself.
Oh gosh, tell you about myself.
Yeah, 10th album. Talk about that.
Should I go into the artist
Sure,
world? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we can bounce around.
Well, that's really fun because I made this record in Portland, just finished. Cool. And I made it with my friends Mark Robertson, Bob Reynolds, who I first started playing with in Chico. So it's a very full circle moment where I made my first record with them.
Uh-huh. Oh, that's cool.
And then they moved to Portland and I did a bunch of other stuff, and then Mark was saying he built this studio. He makes microphones, and he has this setup in Corbett, which is right outside of Portland. And I went up there for a few days, and we just sat and recorded everything, and we rekindled the magic. It always feels really organic working with them.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And just to be able to collaborate still with the people you started with 15, 20 years ago is pretty rare.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
It feels special.
That's
and I feel like
awesome.
some of that shines through with the recording. Is just our friendship and
Right.
collaboration over time is densely put into the music,
That's really cool.
Yeah.
And what's this album called?
Madrone.
Okay. Cool.
Madrone.
And when will it be out?
That's a great question. I think next year, spring.
Okay.
That's the goal. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, yeah. So to front load with the announcement.
I started with,
that's really cool though.
Yeah. I don't know, listening back to some of it, it's just, it brings back a lot of memories of when I first played in Chico, and the process when we first started is the same as it is now.
Yeah.
in terms of how we collaborated and the way that we go about music. The end product is different and the music sounds different, but the process is still very organic between us. So
yeah. That's neat.
Yeah.
And it feels like, I don't know, I feel like as we get older, we kind of go back to the things that first, spark.
Right.
And I don't know, I at one point decided that dragons were not cool to paint anymore. As an example.
Right. And then you came full circle.
Yeah. And I'm doodling in my sketchbook, and a little ant guy shows up, and so the process, those things are deeply embedded in us, and it's cool to be able to rekindle that with all the experience that you're bringing to it now.
Right. Yeah, that's well put. I think over the 15 years since we first met, there's been a lot of evolution with what we've learned with our instruments and how we create music. Mm-hmm. But the initial feeling and excitement of collaborating is still there. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what felt so good about making this, is the process was actually fun.
Yeah.
And that's not always the case. Sometimes you're working on creating this product that exemplifies this intention of what you want to create. And this was more about the initial feeling that drove us to play in the first place.
Yeah.
And when you're creating from that space, there's nothing that can go wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the key part is, like, are you having fun with it? You know, because to use my dragon example, like I drew a lot of dragons because it was fun, and I drew a lot of animals, and I made maps, and like, you know, I just did what felt good. And then at one point I felt like I needed to do the serious work, you know, and I got burnt out, you know.
Exactly. Yeah. To go back to the space where you were driven to it without thinking about being driven to it.
Right.
That's the zone.
Yeah.
And then you go off and you try to hone your craft, which everyone should. And then there starts to put some effort. You have your hands on the steering wheel more, and and then to be able to come back to that first initial reason, I think is the ideal cycle of creation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because then you're able to bring, like, this is the whole, like, you're supposed to learn the rules in order to break them kind of thing. You know, like, so there definitely is something to be said for getting your technical skill down.
Absolutely.
So that you can, you know, take that spirit and then create something really, really magical. So yeah, exactly. And so Mark, he's the producer and the engineer for this, and part of his craft was learning how to weld and solder and make microphones. He built a whole studio and honed the craft of recording and engineering, as well as being a musician. And so each of us went on that path, and to come back with that honed skill and to collaborate and then go back to the initial space of creation for creation's sake. Right.
What a gift. It's just like, oh man.
Yeah.
It felt so good to complete something like that, knowing the process was coming from that spot.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. And just collaboration in general is a miracle.
It is.
The idea that you can with all of your baggage, come into a room with your stuff and somehow meld what you perceive to be the right creative choices and
together. Yeah.
It's a miracle that there can be this sameness when, oh yes, this is it. When there's so much background noise that you're bringing to every decision. So to be able to do that with people and know that it feels right is rare.
Yeah.
Because it can feel wrong, like any relationship. You just this feels wrong. We're both coming from spaces and bringing to the table something that's not meshing. Yeah. Which is so easy to do. So when you find it, you're like, oh, this is you're fortunate if you can find that.
For sure. And I think I feel like musicians, I mean, there's a lot of solo musicians. Yeah. But those that like collaborate in bands and things, I feel like you see that a lot more frequently than in visual arts. And as a visual artist, you know, there's a lot of isolation involved. Yeah. There isn't a lot of that collaboration. I think the most common collaboration you see is like, let's get together and curate a show, you know, where it's like, this is my work, it fits with your work, but we're doing our own thing, you know. So I
can't even imagine as a visual artist, you draw half something, you're like, can you just come in on the second half?
Right. I mean, it's what people
what an experiment.
Do with comics traditionally, you know, was someone sketched, someone inked, someone did the lettering, someone wrote the thing, you know. So that I think is a good example of collaboration, but I'm trying to think of like some kind of, I don't know if there's really a parallel for that, which is interesting.
Well, I can only make the parallel as a solo artist when I do write by myself, is that you're collaborating with the people in your mind. Yeah. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like you're collaborating
we all
with
contain multitudes, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so there's that internal collaboration that's very intense. But when you collaborate with others, you're bringing the collaboration in your minds to everyone else's, and then it's a double collaboration.
Right.
It's like, which even further emphasizes the point that it's a miracle that it works.
Right. Yeah, totally. I mean, that, reminds me of It's a Miracle Any of Us is here, like for everything to come together in the womb and create a functional human is amazing.
Right.
So, giving birth creatively is the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk a little bit about you in Chico. So you came from Connecticut. How did you end up in Chico?
My cousins live here, and there's so many factors that brought me here. So I went to school in New York.
And you've kind of come and gone, right? Back to Chico? Or
Yeah, I've been pretty steady here the last 10 years.
Okay.
But when I first moved here, I graduated in New York, and my advisor was from California. And he said, you got to look in California. They have some of the best communication schools. So it was academic reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And so I looked at San Diego State and then Chico, and my cousins live here, who all have families in
Mm-hmm.
town. And they were pushing for me to come here. One of my cousin's neighbors was in the communication department, and I got on a phone call with her. I was really persuaded, and I applied to the grad program. I got a teaching assistantship, so that's what sold it. And I was like, I'm coming out.
Yeah.
So I started teaching, I graduated, and that's when I started collaborating musically with people in town.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
That's specifically where I met Mark and Bob.
Yeah.
While I was in grad school.
Yeah.
And that was 2007.
Yeah.
Wow.
A long time ago.
Yeah.
Well, cool. And so now that you've been here, you said over a decade.
Yeah, consistently.
Yeah. And, but like you were in Santa Cruz for a little bit.
I was in Santa Cruz for a year.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I taught
and we
at the
crossed
Bay
paths
School.
there. 'Cause
Right.
we were in Santa Cruz for a little bit. So yeah.
And I had some fun collaborations there too. Great musicians in Santa Cruz. Wow.
Yeah.
So that was great. It was a little love affair with Santa Cruz.
Yeah.
It was beautiful, but also unsustainable.
Oh my God, yeah.
Just money and being able
Yeah.
to. And there was no opportunities to teach there, which is definitely another part of my creative side teaching's performative in many ways. So.
Yeah.
And feeds me. And something that feels natural for me to be doing, and that I couldn't find that in Santa Cruz.
Yeah.
So
that's cool to hear about teaching, because like there's often the like those who can't teach, which is really like a negative view of artists who teach. But it sounds like it's really part of who you are, is being a teacher.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't even explain how rejuvenating teaching is. And there's just not many contexts where we can all go into a space, and it's collaboration again, where 30 students and myself as facilitator get to, for an hour, hyper focus on theories and concepts that are a part of our lives, whether we've neglected to see it or not. Specifically for me is small group communication, which is health and family systems, internal family systems, nonviolent communication. So we get to process all these theories and how they've impacted our lives. And nowhere can we all get together and do that without this specific scenario, right?
That's true.
And so what an opportunity. 3 times a week we get to sit in this class and do this together. And so it's a real opportunity, and I don't take it for granted that's a sacred time. And I give everything to that job, because I think I've walked away, at least as a student, when there's a teacher that authentically knew that it was a spiritual practice to teach.
Right.
And it didn't matter what the subject was. It was Paul Stamets said, I'm a sucker for an enthusiast, I think. It doesn't matter. It could be about anything. As long as that person is enthused, I will share that. It's totally magnetic. So, and that's another big thing is I care about the material, and I can't fake it. I love it, and I hope students get that from me.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
Do you have like a favorite local spot or place to hang out here in Chico? place
I've
to...
been very introverted these days, so I was going to say my house and
I think
instantly.
most of us, honestly.
Yeah, my house. There's a local spot though. Let's see. I do like being outside, you know, so I would say honestly the plaza, just going downtown, going by the river at Chico State and just sitting. There's a lot of spots where I try to find little nooks to be alone. The older I get, the more I need to be alone to recalibrate. And so I don't necessarily like to go find a spot where it's loud, because it's already loud.
Yeah.
It's already so loud.
Yeah.
So I don't want to find, that's not my, I don't go out there to find that.
Right.
And I've noticed a lot of my mental health is better for that, is checking in with myself and knowing that that's what I need is not more distraction.
Right.
Is more internal silence.
Like, time to process the distractions.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for sure. And so you went to school for communications.
Yes.
And so how did you get into music? Has that always been a part of your life and growing up? And
yeah. Music is one of the mediums, you know.
Say how long you found my child buried in the sands of paradise. Sad, oh, it's all been said. Picking through the trash, and honey, I'm writing, and you're how it was, but we're painted right in paradise. You know it's paradise. Now I watch the winter, and it turns to spring. It's in the simple things. Take a moment, oh, and let it die, and rise again in paradise. She's pouring salt into the ocean, and I'm floating home. I'm floating home. I said I'm floating home to paradise.
I see it just as the same way that my son just asked me this the other day. What was your favorite year of school?
Mm-hmm. I love that question.
Oh, he asked the best question.
I should ask him for interview questions.
Oh, kid interviews. They're gold. They're gold. So yeah, I have so many good questions that he asked me. I was driving. When is the apocalypse gonna come, Dad?
It's a good question.
On the way to school.
Yeah.
Like a minute before I dropped him off, he needed that answer. I was like, soon, son. Have a good day. And so he asked me that question, and I thought about it. Junior year of college. I'm digressing, but I will get to your initial question. Yeah. And that was when I knew that learning was my connective point to the human experience. That was when I was like, oh, I'm not letting that go. This is my brain was on fire. And everyone has those moments where something clicks.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And music was that way for me too. And that was somewhat around that same year too, where I was looping guitar patterns, and I remember the scene vividly, and everyone was going out to party or whatever, and I decided not to, which was rare at the time for me. And I just stayed looping these patterns, and I thought, this is worthwhile. Uh-huh. And so that was another medium of choice, was playing music. And since then, luckily, piano and guitar have been that way, where I can loop it and find this kind of trance-like worthwhile zone that that gets rid of all the muck. Mm-hmm. And I'm able to feel the human experience palpably, which I think we're fortunate if we're able to find that medium, whatever that is. Yeah. So teaching is one, and music is one too. But sometimes I'm sure you, as a visual artist, experience that where you don't paint or draw, and it's not the medium for whatever, that 6 months or the year, and it'll come back, or maybe it won't, and maybe there'll be some other medium. Yeah. Parenting is a medium for me too. Yeah. Where I won't touch music, or it's just, I don't gravitate to it, but
I like that kind of reframe of where you're putting your energy. Yeah. Because we can't, like, I'm a new parent, and I have a day job. Thank you. Yeah, he's 9 months, and he's currently fighting all his naps, and it's a blast. Yeah. And I have a day job, and I have an art practice, and now I'm doing this podcast. Like, there's a lot, and like seasons of life and putting your energy into things, like, it is okay to step away from certain things if they become burdens, Yeah. And in 2020, I switched completely to knitting. Like, that was my happy place, was knitting from painting or anything. And yeah, so I really like, because there's a lot of guilt associated with not doing your creative practice, for whatever reason.
Yeah, and I think that question of where that comes from is an important one to answer for all of us. Yeah. Why do I feel that because what creative endeavor is worth it if you're pressured? Exactly. If you're pressuring yourself to stick with it. Yeah. And yeah, your story reminded me of my wife, who's a jeweler, but then we had two children together, and she moved on to beading and sewing, right? And I watch her. She's so satiated by those things. And to be able to shift and not even consciously step away, it feels like, especially for her, and on good days for me too, I'm not saying I need to step away. It's just you've stepped away because other things are calling you to, calling your attention.
And babies have a very strong, loud call.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's like that's what's drawing me. Yep. And that's where I need to go. Yeah. And that's where I'll go. Done. Yep. Yeah. And as you know too, that energy is cyclical, so when the calling to create comes back around, you'll get fed from all the stuff that you just did with parenting and everything else. It'll go right into that. Yeah.
That's a like excellent reframe for everybody. All humans.
It's that balance, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that I was really moved by the Lauryn Hill speech when she was being pressured about when her next album was coming out, and she was saying, "Where do you think these albums come from?"
Yeah.
I'm living my life. And that's where the first album came from. And I'm living my life. And the next album will come when there's stuff that's worth singing about.
Yeah.
You know? You can't just make stuff out of nothing.
Yeah.
You need the raw material of living.
Yeah, absolutely. So what does music look like in your life today? You know,
It's pretty minimal, as you know. The
Right.
nap schedule, I'm
yeah.
distinctly playing piano key, like putting my ear to it, saying, "Is that the one?"
During naps. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no more bombastic things happening. It's light,
Right.
or it's pseudo playing where I'm tinkering, but then a baby comes and grabs the guitar, and then I say, "Oh, right, you can." I put it down, and then they all step on it and crack the wood, and then so there's no continuity, and so this last album, I had this brain bleed that I can talk about for sure if you want.
Yeah,
if you want to go there,
I would
or we can
love
just leave it at that. I had a brain bleed. No. That's enough. And then afterward, I had some time to heal, and,
Right.
and all of those songs are from that time of healing, and they
Okay,
all were
cool.
just like bleh, came out really quickly, and
Yeah.
so that was. But since then, it's funny. Then we recorded it, and I haven't been playing very much, and it's
Yeah.
hard to practice with kids. But luckily, I find these kind of these purges of creativity in big chunks of time. So that allowed me to do it when I was healing, but then school started, and so I'm
Right.
kind of back in the swing of things and not touching instruments or singing very
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. So let's touch on the brain bleed rather
do
than
it.
just that happened last summer.
Yeah, last
yeah.
summer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what, like, I remember when like the GoFundMe came out, and like, you know, everyone was talking about this like potentially horrible thing happening. Like, so
Yeah.
tell us what happened.
Yeah. Well, I was
Like,
playing
obviously you're fine. So for the most part.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, so I was playing soccer, and I felt this pop in the back of my neck, and I thought,
Trigger warning for anyone who doesn't like. My husband hates brain stuff, so trigger warning for my husband. Okay,
there
continue.
will be brains discussed in the next 5 minutes. And yeah, it was 106 degrees.
Oh, God,
It was
yeah,
this men's
right.
soccer league, and it's kind of aggressive.
Yeah.
So I thought, oh, maybe I bumped into someone. And then I went out, and then I started getting nauseous, and I drove home, and it started getting worse and worse. And I got home, I said, oh, wow, something's not right. And so I drove myself to the ER. And there's so many stories within this story, so I'll try to pare it down. But they ended up thinking it was something else because, I don't know, they had maybe had this perceived notion that I'm young and that this couldn't be that grave. Must be heat exhaustion, that kind of thing. So I was sent home, and I didn't sleep, obviously. They said if I would have fallen asleep, I would have died.
Yeah. Similar to a concussion, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was just just writhing on the couch.
Yeah,
all
trying to stay
night.
awake. Yeah.
Yeah, and then my family woke up and saw me, and I was like, I need to go back to the hospital now. And so I went back, and then there was a new doctor who was, something's wrong.
Took it
and actually,
seriously.
one of my old students was a nurse when I
Oh,
went
wow.
back in. I was just like, that
Yeah.
was, like, I know you from somewhere. And then they said, you know, you might not make it. You might have to call your family. Like, this is bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and then they got on a helicopter and spent 2 weeks in the ICU in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And my wife was 9 months pregnant.
Right.
So we had to get a midwife in San Francisco while I was in the ICU in case she went to labor.
Yeah.
which she didn't. And then I got home and our daughter was born in our house.
Wow.
A week later.
Yeah. I remember those posts on Facebook. Yeah, just like what a like roller coaster. My God. And then now you have 2 children. You're recovering from a brain bleed, and one of them is fresh.
Yeah.
It's crazy time.
Yeah, and that was in June of last summer, and then 2 months later I go back to work.
Yeah. Wow.
Which was a question for me. Do I want to go back to work? I mean, obviously they would have understood if I didn't, but I did want to develop some routine and normalcy back into my life. So
yeah, for sure.
So I went back, and the first couple months were rough. Memory lapses and just overall aches and dizziness and nausea. But then there's a moment where it stopped and there were no symptoms at all. Wow. And it's been that way ever since.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah, it was.
Oh my goodness.
And I don't have a real explanation for why. You know, they said it was it wasn't an aneurysm.
Right.
A congenital weak vein in my brain that popped.
Yeah. Yeah. Weird.
Yes. Just there you go.
Yeah.
The fragility of it all.
I know.
Came out the other side. So.
Jeez. Wow. And so out of that came this new album, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I'm very thankful for that stroke for giving me this record.
I mean, isn't that how it all works?
Yeah. I was just thinking too, because the power of words is for stroke versus brain bleed. I always choose brain bleed because something about stroke makes it seem like more intense, or that I had a brain bleed.
Yeah.
And there's at the hospital, like anytime there's blood on the brain, it's called a stroke. I was like, that's a brain bleed, actually. We're just gonna call it a brain.
Well, there's definitely association with like being of a certain age before you can call it a stroke.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It was like, I'm 38, had a stroke. You had a stroke?
Right.
38?
Right.
It was a brain bleed, technically.
Yeah, that makes it easier to explain.
Yeah. But yes, there's just so much to process that from that experience, and the medium that tends to find me when I'm processing deep stuff is music. It's not always that, but when there's things that my pragmatic analytical mind can't wrap my head around, that's when music comes in, thankfully.
Right.
And it doesn't have to necessarily, the sense making tool for me of music making is that it doesn't have to make sense.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, that like obviously there are lyrics, there are words involved, but it's more than just words. Like, and even those words can be about something bigger than just the words, you know. So you're able to then tap into something that words can't really express.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we talk about that in class, how all words are lies. They can't
fully encompass the thing that they're trying to.
So therefore they can't be true.
Right.
Because they're not the thing. They can only point.
Right.
So words point, but music with words, so it's like degrees of how well that communication points to the truth or the essence of something. And we could talk about it, but then you sing about it and people know that, or you write a poem about it, and they tend to have a little bit of a stronger arrow to the truth of things.
Right. Yeah.
So that's why that function helps me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I have a similar experience. Like postpartum, my work completely switched into abstract, and I just it just was like pouring out of me. I made like 50 paintings in the first 3 months of the year or something crazy.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. These experiences, like, they unlock things in us. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good word for it. It unlocks.
Yeah. And then we need some way to process it that we can't necessarily put words to.
Yeah.
So last question, what is the best part about being a musician in Chico?
I'm a musician in Chico.
Yes,
Right.
you are.
Okay.
By definition.
I have to switch my brain on for it because I don't play that often anymore.
Uh-huh.
I almost feel like I have to.
How has Chico fed into your work, I guess, would be another way to.
Yeah. Well, as you know, the Chico community is art focused. It can be. It's a strong central network of supporters. So that in and of itself is, I'm lucky to be here because there is that community. I grew up on the East Coast, and then we had these suburbs in Connecticut where I grew up, and there was no such thing as an art community.
Yeah.
That just didn't exist. It was the first thing that I noticed when I came out here. People are just going to shows and receptions, and it just wasn't a thing. You know? And it didn't matter the town. And you go to a city, sure, and it'll be there, but my upbringing was not that. And so even to bring my kids out to shows, like they're getting this experience of these songs they're not top 40 bands. They're playing their own original.
Yeah.
We went out to bars or restaurants, and if there was live music, it was just cover
bands.
Yeah, exactly. So being in this town is keeping the momentum for me.
Awesome.
You know what I'm saying? And without it, I could easily retreat into my own world, which would be fine. But really, when you perform, there's this cycle that comes back that affirms the process. And so I get enlivened whenever I play, which is not often, but once or twice a month, maybe. Or maybe once a month. And whenever I do, it's just an enlivening experience. So I'm always thankful for that.
Yeah.
And to pass on to my next generation, 3 kids. So and they get to be a part of it, and they're soaking up all that, the possibility of creation.
Yeah.
Like, this is possible. Look, people are doing it,
Absolutely. Well, awesome. Where can people find you online or figure out where you'll be performing?
The best place is my website, Pat Home Music.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks
Great.
for having me.
Yeah.
I feel like we could go on forever.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. Totally.
Congrats.
Maybe we'll have you come
being
back.
New mama.
Thank
9
you.
months.
I know. It went by so fast.
That's wild.
It's crazy. He's like a full-on baby. He's no longer like newborn is far, far in the past. It feels like it's crazy. He's about to start crawling.
I was gonna ask that. Yeah.
Yeah. He's doing that little like jig thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The rocking
on his
back
knees.
and forth. Yeah.
Yep. So we do have to wrap it up, unfortunately. But please do, if you like this show, subscribe, and donate. We are accepting donations to keep this thing rolling. Monthly or one-off, whatever you want to give would be awesome. So thank you so much for watching or listening, and we will see you around town.